All right, we're going to listen to the testimony of Mr. Jack Ruby. The President's Commission, the Warren Commission, they met at 11:45 a.m. on June 7th, 1964, in the interrogation room of the Dallas County Jail, which is at Main and Houston in Dallas, Texas. The people present are Chief Justice of the Warren Commission, Earl Warren. You have Representative Gerald R. Ford, former president. Also present are J. Lee Rankin, who is the attorney in the room. You have Joseph Ball, the assistant attorney. Arlen Specter, assistant attorney. Leon Jaworski and Robert Story. They're all special counsel to the Attorney General of Texas. Jim Bowie, assistant district attorney. Joe H. Tonahill, attorney for Jack Ruby. And Elmore W. Moore, the special agent, U.S. Secret Service. And J.E. Decker, sheriff of Dallas County. And the testimony of Jack Ruby will be read in my normal voice. Here we go. Without a lie detector test on my testimony, my verbal statements to you, how do you know if I am going to tell the truth? Don't worry about that, Jack. Just a minute, gentlemen. You wanted to ask something, did you, Mr. Ruby? I would like to be able to get a lie detector test or a truth serum of what motivated me to do what I did at that particular time. And it seems as you get further into something, even though you know what you did, it operates against you somehow, brainwashes you, that you are weak in what you want to tell the truth about and what you want to say, which is the truth. Now, Mr. Warren, I don't know if you got any confidence in the lie detector test and the truth serum and so on. I can't tell you just how much confidence I have in it, because it depends on so much as who is taking it and so forth. But I will say this to you, that if you and your counsel want any kind of test, I will arrange it for you. I would be glad to do that if you want it. I wouldn't suggest a lie detector test to testify the truth. We will treat you just the same as we do any other witness. But if you want such a test, I will arrange for it. I do want it. Will you agree to that, Joe? I sure do, Jack. Any kind of test you want to verify what you say, we will be glad to do. I want it even if you put me into a sort of drowsiness so you can question me as to anything pertaining to my involvement in this particular act. Jack, you wanted to do that from the very beginning, haven't you? Yes. And the reason why I'm asking for it, that is, are you limited for time? No, we have all the time you want. As I started his trial, I don't know if you realize my reasoning how I happened to be involved. I was carried away tremendously emotionally, and all the time I tried to ask Mr. Belly, I wanted to get up and say the truth regarding the steps that led me to do what I got involved in. But since I have a spotty background in the nightclub business, I should have been the last person to ever want to do something that I was involved in. In other words, I was carried away tremendously. You want to ask me questions? You tell us what you want, and then we will ask you some questions. I think he ought to be sworn, said Mr. Rankin. Am I boring you? Said Mr. Ruby. Go ahead. All right, Mr. Ruby, tell us your story, the Chief Justice said. That particular morning, where is Mr. Moore? I had to go down to the news building. Getting back to this, I don't want to interrupt. What morning do you mean? Friday morning, the starting of the tragedy. Mr. Belly evidently did not go into my case thoroughly circumstantially. If he had gone into it, he wouldn't have tried to vindicate me on the insanity plea, to relieve me of all responsibility, because circumstantially, everything looks so bad for me. It can happen. It happens to many people who happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Had Mr. Belly spent more time with me, he would have realized not to try to get me out completely free. At the time we were talking, technically, how attorneys operate, I understand. Different things came up, flashed back into my mind, that it dirtied my background, that Mr. Belly and I decided, oh yes, when I went to say that I wanted to get on the stand and tell the truth what happened that morning, he said, Jack, When they get you on the stand, you're actually speaking of a premeditated crime that you are involved yourself in. But I didn't care, because I wanted to tell the truth. He said, when the prosecution gets you on the stand, they will cut you to ribbons. So naturally I had to retract. And he fought his way to try to vindicate me out of this particular crime. You follow that? I do indeed. I want you to question me and re-question me on anything you want. Plus the fact I do want the tests when they are available. Yes. On Friday, the morning parade, this goes back to Thursday night, because it has something to do with it. We were having dinner at the Egyptian restaurant. Right now, Mr. Ruby, before we get started taking your testimony, would you mind being sworn in? Both men raised their right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give before the commission will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Now, will you please state whether the things that you have just told us are under your oath? I do so state they are the truth. Now, you complete whatever story you want to tell. All right. Thursday night, I was having dinner at the Egyptian restaurant on Mockingbird Lane, and a fellow comes over to the table. I was sitting with a guy by the name of Ralph Paul. He tried to invite me to the club a couple of doors down, and I refused, because he had taken a band away from me that had been engaged for 7 years, and I felt it was a lost cause, that the club would be failing because of that, and I sort of excused myself, and I refused to go over to the club. We finished our dinner, and I went down to the club that I operated, the Carousel, and this particular master of ceremonies happened to be there at the time, and we discussed a few things, and there was a columnist by the name of Tony Zoppi. And prior to that, I wrote out a full-page copy of this build. I have the copies as in MC, and I brought a picture and a brochure. And Tony said, I will write a story. This was done 2 days prior to this Thursday night. So then I went down. So we discussed it, and we were very much disgusted with Tony because he only gave us a build of 1 or 2 lines. Well, I retired that night after closing the club. Then I knew I wanted to go back to the morning news building to get the brochure I left. And also this complete page of longhand writing described the various talents of the Bill DeMar. I picked up the brochure that Friday morning, and I also had business at the news building on Friday because that is the start of the weekend, which is very lucrative, the weekend. I have ways of making my ads of where they have a way of selling the product I am producing or putting on the show. So I went down there Friday morning to Tony Zoppi's office, and they said he went to New Orleans for a couple days. I picked up the brochure. I believe I got downtown there at 10:30 or 11 o'clock that morning. And I took the brochure and then went into the main room where we compose our ads. That is the sales room where we placed our ads. And I remained there for a while. I started to write the copy of my ad. Now I go back to the same fellow that wanted me to come over to the club when we were having dinner on the Mockingbird at the Egyptian Lounge. I came to the desk and I wanted to apologize and explain why I didn't accept his invitation last night. I want to explain that, and that took about 20 or 25 minutes. All this is pertaining to everything prior to the terrible tragedy that happened. I started to explain to him why I didn't want to go there. Because this fellow mentioned Tony, I can't think of his last name, of me having his band so many years. And I felt at that moment I didn't want to go over the club because I didn't care to meet this fellow. And he started to apologize. Jack, I'm so sorry. I did work for the fellow, and we have been advertising him for that club, and I'm putting out a nightclub book. I remained with him for 20 or 25 minutes talking, and I don't know whether my ad was completed or not. It was an ad on the Vegas and the Carousel. My ads were completed, I believe, and after finishing my conversation with him, he left. Suddenly, the man completes my ads for me. That helps me with it on occasion, but I usually take it up myself. But the person that takes the money for the ads, this is the reason it got so hard for me to meet the deadline when I get downtown to the news building. And as a rule, I have to pay cash for my ads. When you are in debt, it is necessary, and they will not put it in unless you pay cash. And consequently, the weekend, I had been to town on that particular day. All this adds up later, as I will state why I didn't go to the parade. In the first place, I don't want to go where there is a big crowd. I can't explain it to you. If I was interested, I would have seen it on television, our beloved president, and all the parade that transpired. But all that adds up, why it is important for me to get to the news building. I owe the government quite a bit of money, and it is doing business out of your pocket, supposedly, in the slang expression. Well, John Newman comes in, and evidently he took it for granted I finished my ad. And I don't recall if he paid for his ad, and suddenly there is some milling around. I think it was John Newman comes in, and evidently he took it for granted that I finished my ad. And I don't recall if he paid for his ad, and suddenly there is some milling around. I think it was 12 or 15 minutes after 12. I don't recall what, but John Newman said that someone had been shot. And I'm sorry, I got carried away. It is the first time I got carried away because I had been under pressure. And someone else came running over and he said a Secret Service man was shot or something to that effect. And I am here in the middle with John Newman because Newman isn't paying any attention to anyone else. And there is a lot of going back and forth. So someone must have made a statement that Governor Connolly was shot. I don't recall what was said, and I was in a state of hysteria. I mean, you say, "Oh my God, it can't happen." You carry on crazy sayings. There was a little television set in one office, not far away from where I had been sitting at the desk. I ran over there and noticed a little boy and a little sister saying, "I was standing right there when it happened." I mean, different things you hear on the television. When the phone started ringing off the desk and I heard John Newman say people were complaining about the ad, they had accepted this ad. Why had they accepted this ad? A tray of water and glasses was brought in. Thank you. Has every witness been this hesitant in trying to explain their story? You are doing well. I can understand why you have to reflect upon a story of that length. The phones were ringing off the desk, calling various ads, and they are having a turmoil in the news building because of a person by the name of Bernard Weissman placing that particular ad, a full-page ad. I'm sure you're familiar with that ad. Yes, I am. Criticizing a lot of things about our beloved president. Then John Newman and I had another gentleman walk over to another part of the room, and I heard John Newman say, "I told him not to take that ad," something to that effect. Then he said, "Well, you have seen him pay part cash and come back and pay the balance." Now everything is very vague to me as when this transpired. After they heard the president had been shot or prior to that. You know, it's been a long time, and I am under a lot of bad mental strain here. Yes. From the time that we were told that the president was shot, 35 minutes later they said he had passed away. In the meantime, I became very emotional. I called my sister at home. She was carried away terribly bad, and John Newman happened to be there, and I know it is a funny reaction you have. You want other people to feel that you feel emotionally disturbed in the same way as other people. So I let John listen to the phone that my sister was crying hysterically. And I said to John, "John, I will have to leave Dallas. I don't know why I said that, but it is a funny reaction that you feel. The city is terribly let down by the tragedy that happened." And I said, "John, I am not opening up tonight." And I don't know what else transpired there. I know people were just heartbroken. I left the room. I may have left out a few things. Mr. Moore remembers probably more. But you come back and question me, and maybe I can answer those questions. I left the building and I went down and I got my car, and I couldn't stop crying. Because naturally, when I pulled up to a stoplight and other people would be adjacent to me, I wouldn't want them to see me crying because it kind of looked artificial. And I went to the club and I came up, and I may have had a couple of calls from there. I could have called my colored boy, Andy, down at the club. I don't know who else I would have called, but I could have, because it is so long now since my mind is very much warped. You think that literally? I went up to the club and I told Andy, I said, "Call everyone and tell them we are not opening. We have a little girl in Fort Worth." I wanted to make sure he called her. And a fellow by the name of Bell called and wanted to know that if we were open. And Kathy Kay called, and I said, "Definitely not." And I called Ralph Paul, that owns the Bullpen. He said, "Jack, being as everyone else is open," because he knows I was pressed for money. And I said, "No, Ralph, I can't open." He said, okay, if that is why, that is the way it's got to be. So in the meantime, I had gone with Alice Nichols for some time, and I called her on the phone, but she wasn't there. But I left the number on the pay phone for her to return the call, because I didn't want to keep the business phone tied up, and I hadn't spoken to her in maybe 9 months or a year. I don't know what I said to her, not many words, but just what happened. I still remained around the club there. I am sure I was crying pretty bad. I think I made a long distance call to California. This fellow had just visited me, and I had known him in the past days in Chicago when we were very young, in the real rough part of Chicago. His name was Al Gruber. He was a bad kid in those days, but he is quite reformed. He is married and has a family, and I'm sure he makes a very legitimate livelihood at this time. He happened to come through a couple of nights prior to that to try to interest me, or 4 or 5 days prior to that, to interest me in a new kind. You follow the story as I tell it? Yes. It is important, very important. It is on a new kind of machine that washes cars. You pay with tokens. It is a new thing. I don't know if it faded out or not. He tried to interest my brother Sammy because Sammy sold his washateria, and my sister was in the hospital when he first came. I am going back a little bit. Sammy didn't go to the hospital, and we needed to tell Sammy about this particular thing, and that is the reason Al Gruber came into the picture. Because he came to try to interest my brother Sammy in this new washateria deal to wash cars. He left and went to California, but before he went to California, I promised him my dachshund dog. When this thing happened, I called him, and he said, yes, we are just watching it on television, and I couldn't carry on more conversation. I said, Al, I have to hang up. Then I must have called my sister Eileen in Chicago. Then a fellow came over to deliver some merchandise I had ordered over the phone, and Andy ordered, and we said, what is the use of purchasing any merchandise of any kind? We are not interested in business. And I don't recall what I said, but I told him whatever money he received, to keep the change. I am not a philanthropist, but nothing bothered me at the time. I wasn't interested in anything. Then I kept calling my sister Eva because she wanted me to come be with her. Eva and I have a very complex personality. Very rarely can I be with her, but on this particular occasion, since she was carrying on so, I felt that I wanted to be with someone that meant something to me. I wanted to be with her. And I kept calling her back. I will be there. And so on. But I never did get there until a couple of hours later. I finally left the club. I'm sure you gentlemen can brief in all the things that happened before. A kid by the name of Larry up there. I think I told him to send the dog they created to find out about the price. Very impulsive about everything. Then I left the club and I had been dieting, but I felt I wanted some food. I can't explain it. It would be like getting intoxicated at that particular time. It is amusing, but it is true. I went over to the Ritz Delicatessen, a block and a half away. Must have bought out the store for about $10 worth of delicacies and so forth. Went out to my sister's and stayed at her apartment. Oh, I called from the apartment. My sister knew more of my calls than I did. I think I called. I can't think of who I called. Anyway, I'm sure I made some calls of what had happened there. Somebody will have to piece me together from the time I got to my sister's apartment, where I had partaken of the food. Oh yes, I called Andy. Then Sandy Armstrong called me and said, Don Safran wants you to call him. This is rare for this gentleman because he's a columnist for the Dallas Times-Herald. Because he never could get out any copy from my club. And he said, Don Safran wants me to call him? I called him and said, Jack, are you going to be closed tonight? I said, yeah. He said, well, the Cabana and the Adolphus in the Century Room are going to be closed. I said, Don, I'm not asking you about any clubs that are going to be closed. I know that I'm going to be closed. And he said, Jack, that is what I want to know. And I said, you don't have to prompt me about who else is going to be closed. I put the receiver down and talked to my sister, and I said, Eva, what shall we do? And she said, Jack, let's close for the 3 days, she said. We don't have anything anyway, but we owe it to... And she choked up. So I called Don back immediately, and I said, Don, we decided to close for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he said, okay. Then I called the morning news, and I wanted to definitely make sure to change a copy of my ad to closed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, something to that effect. And it was a little late in the afternoon, but he said, we will try to get the copy in. Then I called Don back, but couldn't get him. And I spoke to one of his assistants, and I said, I forget what I told him. Anyway, that is one of the calls that had transpired. So I lie down and take a nap. I wake up about 7 or 7:30. In the meantime, I think I called. The reason this comes back to me, I know I was going to go to the synagogue. I called Coleman Jacobson and asked him what time services are tonight, and he said he didn't know. I said, "Are there going to be any special services?" And he said he didn't know of any. I called the congregation Shearith Israel and asked the girl, and she said regular services at 8 o'clock. I said, "Aren't there going to be earlier services like 5:30 or 6?" And about 7:30 I went to my apartment. I don't know if I went downtown to the club. I know I went to my apartment, either to the club or to the apartment. And I changed, showered and shaved, and I think I drove. And as I drove down, there is a certain Thornton Freeway, and I saw the clubs were still open, going full blast, a couple of clubs there. Anyways, I went out to the synagogue and went through the line, and I spoke to Rabbi Silverman and thanked him for going to visit my sister at the hospital. She was in a week prior and had just gotten out. I don't remember the date. Then he had a confirmation. This is the night prior to the confirmation. They served little delicacies. So, in spite of the fact of the mood I was in, I strolled into the place and I think I had a little glass of punch. Nothing intoxicating, just a little punch. I didn't speak to anyone. One girl, Leona, said, "Hello, Jack," and I wasn't in a conversational mood whatsoever. I left the club, left the synagogue, and drove by the Bali High restaurant. I noticed they were open. I took recognition of that. I drove by another club called the Gay 90s, and they were closed. And I made it my business to drive down Preston Road. In my mind, suddenly it mulled over me that the police department was working overtime. And this is the craziest thing that ever happened in a person's life. I have always been very close to the police department. I don't know why. I felt I have always abided by the law. A few little infractions, but not serious. And I felt we have one of the greatest police forces in the world here. And I have always been close to them, and I visited in the office. And over the radio, I heard they were working overtime. I stopped at the Delicatessen, called Phil on Oaklawn Avenue, and suddenly I told the clerk there I wanted him to make me some real good sandwiches, about 10 or 12 of them. And he had already started on the sandwiches, and I got on the phone. I called an officer by the name of Sims, and I said, "Sims, I hear you guys are working," and so on, and I said, "I want to bring y'all some sandwiches." And he said, "Jack, we wound up our work for the day already. We wound up what we were doing. We are finished what we were doing. I will tell the boys about your thoughtfulness, and I will thank them for you. In the meantime, there is a fellow in town that has been very good to me named Gordon McClendon. Do you know him, Mr. Warren?" "I think I do not." He had been giving me a lot of free plugs, and all the while listening to the radio, I heard about a certain disc jockey, Joe Long, that is down at the station giving first-hand information. I want to describe him of Oswald. Very rarely do I use the name Oswald. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain it. Of the person that committed the act. So before going down to the police station, I try to call KLIF, but can't get their number. I wanted to bring the sandwiches to KLIF so they would have sandwiches, since they already started to make them up. And I remember Russ Knight, a disc jockey. These names aren't familiar to you, but I have to mention them in order to refresh my memory. His name was Moore or something, and I tried to get information on the telephone, but they couldn't give me the phone number of his home. I probably thought I could get the phone number but after 6 p.m. You cannot get into the premises unless you have a hot number that is right to the disc jockey room. So I couldn't get a hold of that. But in the meantime, I called Gordon McClendon's home because I know he lives near the synagogue out there, and I got a little girl on the phone, and I knew they had children and asked for the number for KLIF. I said, "Anyone home?" She said, "No." I said, "Is your daddy or mommy home?" I forget what transpired. I said, "I would like to get the number of the station so I can get in the building at this time." She said she would go and see and gave me a Riverside Exchange. Mind you, this is 6 or 7 months back, gentlemen. And I asked her name. She said it was Christine, I think. I said, I wanted to bring her some sandwiches. She said, "My mother already brought sandwiches." And I said, I wanted to go there too. And that was the end of this little girl's conversation with myself. I called that number, and as I am repeating myself, there was no such number. It was an obsolete number. I go down to I drive by, I leave the Delicatessen, and the clerk helped me with the sandwiches out of my car, and I thanked him. I told him, "These are going to KLIF, and I want you to make them really good." He helped me with the sandwiches in the car. I got to the car and drove down toward town. I imagine it was about 4 or 5 miles to the downtown section from the Delicatessen. But prior to going into the station, I drove up McKinney Avenue to look over a couple of clubs to see if they were activating. I knew the club across the Phil's Delicatessen, and I knew the B&B restaurant was open. That is a restaurant, and I know the necessity for food. But I can't understand some of the clubs remaining open. It struck me funny at such tragic time as that happened. I drove down to Commerce and Harwood and parked my car with my dog, incidentally. I always have my dog with me. On the lot there, left the sandwiches in the car, went into the building of the police station, took the elevator up to the second floor, and there was a police officer there. This is the first time I've ever entered the building, gentlemen. The first time of that Friday. This time it must have been about, the time of my entering the building, I guess, approximately 11:15 p.m. The officer was there, and I said, "Where's Joe Long?" He said, "Can I go and look for him?" Evidently, I took a little domineering part about me, and I was able to be admitted. I asked several different reporters and various personalities there, "Are you Joe Long?" And I couldn't locate him. I even had a police officer try to page him, and he couldn't locate him. I recognized a couple of police officers, Cal Jones and a few others, and I said hello. And I am still looking for Joe Long, but I am carried away with the excitement of history. And one fellow then, I'm in that hallway there. There is a narrow hallway, and I don't recall if Captain Fritz or Chief Curry brings the prisoner out, and I'm standing about 2 or 3 feet away from him. And there are some reporters and didn't know the various police officers, and I don't know whether they asked me or I volunteered to tell them, because I knew they were looking to find out who that was. And I said, that was Chief Curry, or that was Captain Fritz, or whoever it was. I don't recall Henry Wade coming out of the hallway. He probably did. I don't recall what happened to him. Then suddenly, someone asked, either the chief or Captain Fritz, "Isn't there a larger room we can go into?" They said, "Well, let's go down to the assembly room downstairs." I don't know what transpired in between from that time that I had the officer page Joe Long up to the time I was standing about 3 feet away from Oswald. All the things I don't recall if I'm telling you everything that happened from that time. From the time I entered the building to the time I went down to the assembly room. I went down to the assembly room down in the basement. I felt perfectly free walking in there. No one asked me or anything. I got up on a little table there where I knew I wasn't blocking anyone's view because there was an abutment sticking out, and I had my back to the abutment, and I was standing there. Then they brought the prisoner out, and various questions were being shouted. I noticed there was a Chief County Judge, Davidson. I can't think of his name. One of these precinct court judges, and they brought the prisoner out. I don't recall if Chief Fritz, Captain Fritz was there, or Chief Curry. I know Henry Wade was there, and they started shouting questions and said, "Is he the one?" And the question about the gun. And they questioned Henry Wade, what organization did he belong to or something. And if I recall, I think Henry Wade answered, "Free Cuba!" And I corrected Henry Wade, because listening to the radio hour KLIF, it stood out in my mind that it was Fair Play Cuba. There was a difference. So he said, "Oh yes, Fair Play Cuba," and he corrected that. I don't know how long we remained there. There was a lot of questions thrown back and forth, and this District Attorney Henry Wade was answering them to the best he could. From the way he stated, he let the reporters know that this was the guilty one that committed the crime. He specifically stated that in the room, that he was the one. It didn't have any effect in my mind, because whether the person had come out, whether he come out openly and publicly stated, didn't have any bearing in my mind, because I wasn't interested in anything. All I knew, they had the prisoner. But the reporters like to know where they stand. Is he the one? We left out in the hallway, and I saw Henry Wade standing there, and I went over to him and said, "Henry, I want you to know I was the one that corrected you. I think it is a childish thing, but I met Henry Wade some time back, and I knew he would recognize me. By the way, it was Fair Play Cuba, or something to that effect." In the meantime, as I leave Henry Wade, 2 gentlemen passed by, and I said, "Are you Joe Long?" He said, "No." "Why, do you want Joe Long?" And I said, "I got to get into KLIF. I've got some sandwiches." And he said, "What about us?" And I said, "Some other time." And so it happened, I found out Jerry Kunkel and Sam Peace. I found out they were the names, so I didn't get the number because these fellows worked for a rival radio station, and he gave me the number of KLIF. And in the testimony of John Rutledge, if I recall now, this is the only time I'd ever seen this person. When I went out the railing, there was the phone where the phone was at. People felt free to walk in. In other words, I felt that I was deputized as a reporter momentarily, you might say. So I called one of the boys at KLIF and I said to him, "I have sandwiches for you. I want to get over there." I said, "By the way, I see Henry Wade talking on the phone to someone. Do you want me to get him over there?" And he said, "Yes, do that." That is when everyone was beckoning Henry Wade, and I called him over, and he talked on the phone to this boy. And after he finished, I didn't even tell him what station it was. I said, "Here is somebody that wants to talk to you." And I felt he wouldn't turn it down. And this fellow was very much elated, and I brought him over there, and I said, "Now will you let me in?" He said, "I will only leave the door open for 5 minutes." That was after the conversation was finished with Henry Wade. I got ready to leave the building, and I got up to the next floor, and there was another disc jockey, Russ Knight. He said, "Jack, where is everything happening?" And he had a tape recorder, and I said, "Come on downstairs," and led him downstairs, and there was Henry Wade sitting there. And I said, "Henry, this is Russ Knight." And I left him there with Henry Wade, and I went to my car and drove over to KLIF, which is a block away. And it was a little chilly that night, as I recall, but by bringing Russ Knight over to Henry Wade, I delayed too long to get into KLIF. I had to wait 15 minutes until Russ Knight came from finishing his interview. I had the sandwiches with me and some soda pop and various things, and Russ Knight opened the door and we went upstairs. This is another man on my staff, Mr. Spector. Would you mind if he comes in here also? Is there any way to get me to Washington, D.C.? I beg your pardon? Is there any way of you getting me to Washington, D.C.? Said Mr. Ruby. Chief Justice Warren said, "I don't know of any. I will be glad to talk to your counsel about what the situation is, Mr. Ruby, when we get an opportunity to talk." I don't think so. I will get a fair representation with my counsel, Joe Tunhill. I don't think so. I would like to request that I go to Washington, D.C., and you take all the tests that I have to take. It is very important. Jack, will you tell him why you don't think you will get a fair representation? Because I have been over this for the longest time to get the lie detector test. Somebody has been holding it back from me. Mr. Ruby, I might say to you that the lateness of this thing is not due to your counsel. He wrote me, I think, close to 2 months ago and told me that you would be glad to testify and take, I believe he said, any test. I am not sure of that, but he said you would be glad to testify before the commission. And I thanked him for the letter. But we have been so busy that this is the first time we've had an opportunity to do it. But there has been no delay, as far as I know, on the part of Mr. Tunhill in bringing about this meeting. It was our own delay due to the pressures we had on us at the time. What state are you from, Congressman? This is former President Representative Gerald Ford. Says, Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mr. Chief Justice Warren said, "I will be glad to talk that over if we can. You might go right ahead if you wish with the rest of your statement, Mr. Ruby." All right. I remained at KLIF from that moment on. From the time I got into the building with Russ Knight, we talked about various things. I brought out the thought of this ad and Bernard Weissman I'd placed in the newspaper, and I also thought Russ, the one I admired by Gordon McClendon. He came out with the editorial about the incident with Aldi Stevenson and all those things. He is the one person that will immediately go to bat if anything is wrong. He will clarify that. I told Russ Knight there were some other things that were occurring at the time. I remained there till about 2 a.m., and we all partook in sandwiches and had a feast. And they were spliced, the various comments they got back and forth from Henry Wade and Russ Knight's copy, Russ Knight's items of Henry Wade. "Mr. Ruby, this is the young man, Mr. Spector. He's a member of our staff, and he comes from Philadelphia." Ruby shook hands with Mr. Spector. Mr. Ruby said, "I am at a disadvantage, gentlemen, telling my story. You were right at the point where you had it about 2 o'clock in the morning, and you had your feast, as you mentioned, and you had talked to these men and so forth. That was the last that you had told us." Well, lots of things occurred up to that. They talked pro and con about the tragedy. At 2 a.m., I left the building. I drove. I was going to go to the Times Herald building, because as a result, I very rarely go there for my weekend ad, because once I get the ad into the morning news, which is the earlier issue, all I have to do is call the newspaper and they transpire the same ad and had it in the newspaper into the morning news. And I promised one of these boys working in the Times Herald building there that I was in the business of a twist board deal, and I promoted it as a sales item and by advertisement. And I had been evading him and didn't have time to go out there because it was very late and I left the club and didn't want to stop. But because this was an early morning, I thought this would be the right time to go over there. Plus the fact of changing my ad, I had been in the morning news to closing in 3 days. That I would go over there and maybe add a little more effectiveness to it in the way I wanted the ad placed. As I was driving toward the Times-Herald with the intention of doing these things, I heard someone honk a horn very loudly, and I stopped. There was a police officer sitting in a car. He was sitting with this young lady that works in my club, Kathy Kay. And they were very much carried away. And I was carried away. And he had a few beers, and it was so bad about those places open. And I was a great guy to close, and I remained with them. Did I tell you this part of it? I don't recall this part, no. I didn't tell you this part because at the time I thought of this Harry Carlson as a police officer. And either it slipped my mind in telling this, or it was more or less a reason for leaving it out because I felt I didn't want to involve them in anything. Because it was supposed to be a secret that he was going out with this young lady. He had marital problems. I don't know if that is why I didn't tell you. Anyway, I did leave it out. His name is Harry Carlson. Her name is Kathy Kay. And they talked and they carried on, and they thought I was the greatest guy in the world. And he stated they should cut this guy inch by inch into ribbons and so forth. And she said, well, if he was in England, they would drag him through the streets and hang him. I forget what she said. I left them for a long delay. They kept me from leaving. They were constantly talking and were in a pretty dramatic mood. They were crying and carrying on. I went to the building of the Times-Herald. May I read that, Joe? May I please? Joe Tonahill, the attorney in the room, hands a paper to Jack Ruby. Sam, ever get your glasses? Mr. Ruby said, not yet. This is the girl that... What? They started Jack off. What is the other word? Accumulated? That is untrue. That is what I wanted to read. He threw the pad on the table. Gentlemen, unless you get me to Washington, D.C., you can't get a fair shake out of me. If you understand my way of talking, you have got to bring me to Washington to get the test. Do I sound dramatic? Off the beam? Chief Justice Moore said, no, you are speaking very, very rationally, and I'm very surprised that you can remember as much as you remembered up to the present time. You have given it to us in detail. Unless you get me to Washington, I am not a crackpot. I have all my senses. I don't want to evade any crime I'm guilty of. But Mr. Moore, have I spoken this way when we have talked? Yes. Unless you get me to Washington immediately, I'm afraid after what Mr. Tonahill has written there, which is unfair to me regarding my testimony here, you all want to hear what he wrote? Yes, you might read it. If you need glasses again, try mine this time. This is the girl thing, isn't it? This is the thing that started Jack in the shooting. Kathy Kay was talking about Oswald. You're lying, Joe Tonahill. You're lying. Mr. Tonahill says, no, I'm not. Mr. Ruby says, you're lying because you know what motivated me. You know. You want to make it that it was a premeditation. Mr. Tonahill said, no. Mr. Ruby said, yes, you do, Mr. Tonahill said. I don't think there was any premeditation, but you go ahead and tell it your way. That is what we want you to do. That is what the Chief Justice wants. Not when you specify this. You are Senator Rankin? Mr. Rankin says, no, I'm the general counsel for our commission, Mr. Ruby. Mr. Tonahill says, you go on and keep telling it down to Caroline and the truth. Chief Justice Warren said, Mr. Ruby, may I suggest this, that if we are to have any tests, either a lie detector or, as you suggested, truth serum, I don't know anything about truth serum, but if we are to have it, we have to have something to check against, and we would like to have the rest of your stories as you started to tell us, because you are now getting down to the crucial part of it, and it wouldn't be fair to you to have to tell this much and then not have the rest. Mr. Ruby said, because the reason why Joe knows from the time that I told Attorney Belly that the story I wanted to tell on the stand, and Mr. Tonahill knows this isn't the time, the thought never entered my mind. He knows it. Mr. Tonahill said, I didn't say the thought entered your mind. I didn't say that. You were referring it. I was unconsciously referring it maybe, but what I meant to say was, why go back to Friday, Joe? You're going back. You're going to come right down. Why go back to Friday? That set me off. Then it is greater premeditation than you know is true. Mr. Tonahill said, I don't say it is premeditation. I never have. I don't think that it is. Mr. Ruby said, because it never entered my mind when they talked about it. The officer cutting into his bits, you would have built up for my defense, but that is not it. I am here to tell the truth. Mr. Tonahill said, the psychiatrist said that to me. Mr. Ruby said, you want to put that into my thoughts, but it never happened. I took it with a grain of salt, what he said at that particular time. Well, it is too bad, Chief Warren, that you didn't get me to your headquarters 6 months ago. Well, Mr. Ruby, I will tell you why we didn't. Because you were then about to be tried, and I didn't want to do anything that would prejudice your trial. And for that reason, I wouldn't even consider asking you to testify until your trial was over. That is the only reason why we didn't talk to you sooner. And I wish we had gotten here a little sooner after the trial was over, but I know you had other things on your mind, and we had to other work, and it got to this late date. But I assure you, there is no desire on our part to let this matter go any late date for any ulterior purpose. I assure you of that. And as I told you in the beginning, if you want a test of some kind made, I will undertake to see that it's done. You have the power to do it, even though the district attorney objects to me getting the test? Yes, I do. How soon can it be done? Well, I'm not familiar with those things, but we will try to do it expeditiously. You may be sure, because we are trying to wind up this work of the commission, and I assure you we won't delay. Are you staying overnight here, Chief Warren? No. I have to get back, because we have an early session at the court tomorrow morning. Is there any way of getting a polygraph there? Here? Mr. Decker of the room said, "May I make a suggestion? Jack, listen, you and I have had a lot of dealings. Do you want my officers removed from the room while you talk to this commission?" Miss Ruby said, "That wouldn't prove any truth." Mr. Decker said, "These people came several thousand miles to interview. You have wanted to tell me your story, and I have refused to let you tell me. Now be a man with a bunch of men, and have come a long ways to give you an opportunity to do so. You asked me for permission to tell your story, and I told you no. This is a supreme investigating committee at this particular time. Now give them your story and be a man, if you want them to deal with you and deal fairly with you." Mr. Ruby said, "It is unfair to me unless I get all the facilities to back up what I say." Mr. Decker said, "You tell him your story. Nobody is denying it. You tell this man. He has come 1,000 miles or more to listen to you. Now be a man about it." Mr. Moore said, "What I suggest, Jack, at one time I was a polygraph operator, and you would not be able to go through the entire story the way you have here. So seriously, you should just tell the story, and the things you want checked, you can be asked directly. Because you can only answer yes or no on a polygraph examination anyways. So I think in view of what you want, you should tell your story first, and then the points that you want verified, you can be questioned on with the polygraph." As the sheriff mentioned, the commission has come a long ways to have the opportunity to listen to your story, and I'm sure that they know you are telling the truth in any case. Mr. Ruby said, "I wish the president were here right now. It is a terrible ordeal, I'll tell you that." "I'm sure it is an ordeal for you, and we want to make it as easy as we can. That is the reason that we have let you tell your story in your own way without being interrupted. If you will just proceed with the rest of your statement, I think it would make it a lot easier for us to verify it in the way that you want it to be done." "I don't know how to answer you." "Well, you have told us most of what happened up to the time of the incident, and you're just within a few hours of it now." There is a Saturday night, there is a Friday night. This is still only Friday night, Chief." "Yes, that is true." "Well, I will go into a certain point, and if I stop, you will have to understand if I stop to get my bearings together." "Yes." "I am in the Times Herald building. I go upstairs naturally. This is about what time? I imagine, I left the KLF at 2 a.m. and I spent an hour with the officer and his girlfriend, so it must have been about 3:15 approximately." "No, it wasn't. When you're not concerned with time, it could have been 4 o'clock. "It doesn't make any difference." 45 minutes difference. I am up there in the composing room talking to a guy by the name of Pat Gaddish. He's so elated, and I brought him this twist board, and I had it sealed in a polyethylene bag. But he wanted to see it, how it is demonstrated, how it was worked. It is a board that is on a pivot, a ball bearing, and it has a tendency to give you certain exercises in twisting your body. So not that I wanted to get in with the hilarity of frolicking, but he asked me to show him, and the other men gathered round. When you get into the movement of ball bearing disc, your body is free to move. I know you look like you are having a gay time, because naturally if your body is so free of moving, it is going to look that way. I'm stating this in that even with my emotional feeling for our beloved president, even to demonstrate the twist board, I did it because someone asked me to. Are you following me, gentlemen, as I describe it? Yes. Then we placed the ad in, and if I recall, I requested from Pat to put a black border around the show that the ad was in mourning or something, because everything was in mourning. "Well, Bill, will you do that for me?" that you asked a minute ago, you said you wanted to leave the room. Mr. Decker said, I will have everyone leave the room, including myself, if you want to talk about it. You name it. Now we go. All right. You want us all outside? Yes. I will leave Tona Hill and Moore, and I'm not going to have Joe leave. If you are not going to have Joe leave, Mr. Decker said, Moore, his body is responsible to you. His body is responsible to you. Mr. Ruby said, Bill, I'm not accomplishing anything if they are here, and Joe Tona Hill is here. You asked me anybody I wanted out. Mr. Decker said, Jack, Mr. Tona Hill is your attorney. That's your lawyer. Mr. Ruby said, he is not my lawyer. Sheriff Decker and law enforcement officers all leave the room. Mr. Ruby says, gentlemen, if you want to hear any further testimony, you will have to get me to Washington soon because has something to do with you, Chief Warren. Do I sound sober enough to tell you this? Chief Warren said, yes, go right ahead. Mr. Ruby said, I want to tell the truth, and I can't tell it here. I can't tell it here. Does that make sense to you? Well, let's not talk about sense, but I really can't see why you can't tell this commission. Mr. Ruby said, what is your name? Mr. Ball. He said, Joe Ball. Chief Justice Warren, Mr. Joe Ball. He's an attorney from Los Angeles who has been working for me. Do you know Belly too? Mr. Ball said, I know of him. Mr. Ruby said, Ball was working with him. He knows Belly. You know Melvin Belly. Mr. Ball said, I'm not acquainted with him. Chief Justice Warren said, no association of any kind. Mr. Ball said, we practice in different cities. 500 miles away. Mr. Ball practices in Long Beach and Mr. Belly practices in San Francisco. There is positively no connection between anyone in this room, as far as I know, with Mr. Belly. I can assure you that. Where do you stand, Moore? Well, I am assigned to the commission, Jack. The president assigned you? No, my chief did. And I am not involved in the investigation. I am more of a security officer. Boys, I'm in a tough spot, I tell you that. Mr. Moore said, you recall when I talked to you? There were certain things I asked you not to tell me at the time, for certain reasons. That you were probably going to trial at the time, and I respected your position on that, and asked you not to tell me certain things. Mr. Ruby said, but this isn't the place for me to tell what I want to tell. Mr. Moore said, the commission is looking into the entire matter, and you are a part of it. Should be. Chief Warren, your life is in danger in this city. Do you know that? Chief Justice Warren said, no, I don't know that. If that is the thing that you don't want to talk about, you can tell me, if you wish, when this is all over, just between you and me. No, I would like to talk to you in private. You may do that when you finish your story. You may tell me that phase of it. I bet you haven't had a witness like me in your whole investigation, is that correct? There are many witnesses whose memory have not been as good as yours, I can tell you that honestly. My reluctance to talk? You haven't had any witness in telling the story and finding so many problems? You have a greater problem than any witness we have had. I have a lot of reasons for having those problems. I know that, and we want to respect your rights, whatever they may be. And I really only want to hear what you're willing to tell us because I realize that you still have a great problem before you, and I am not trying to press you. I came here because I thought you wanted to tell us the story, and I think the story should be told for the public, and it will eventually be made public. If you want to do that, you are entitled to do that. And if you want to have it verified as a thing, can be verified in a polygraph test, you may have it too. I will undertake that for you, but all the events, we must first have the story that we are going to check it against. When you go back to Washington? I'm going back very shortly after we finish this hearing. I'm going to have some lunch. Can I make a statement? Yes. If you request me to go back to Washington with you right now, that couldn't be done, could it? No, it could not be done. It could not be done. There are many good things involved in that, Mr. Ruby. What are they? Well, the public attention that it would attract and the people who would be around. We have no place there for you to be safe when we take you out. And there are not law enforcement officers. And it isn't our responsibility to go into anything of that kind. And certainly, it couldn't be done on a moment's notice this way. Well, from what I read in the paper, they made certain precautions for you coming here. But you got here. There are no precautions taken at all. There were some remarks in the paper about some crackpots. I don't believe anything I read in a paper. Mr. Moore said, in that respect, the Chief Justice is in public life. People in public life are well aware they don't please everyone, and they get threats. Incidentally, if it is the part about George Senator talking about the Earl Warren Society, the Chief Justice is aware of that phase, and I am sure he would like to hear anything that you have to say if it affects the security. The Chief Justice said, before you finish the rest of your statement, may I ask you this question? And this is one of the questions we came here to ask you. Did you know Lee Harvey Oswald prior to this shooting? Mr. Ruby said, that is why I want to take the lie detector test. Just saying no isn't sufficient. I will afford you that opportunity. All right. I will afford you that opportunity. You can't do both of them out at one time. Gentlemen, my life is in danger here. Not with my guilty plea of execution. Do I sound sober enough to you as I say this? You do. You sound entirely sober. From the moment I started my testimony, I have sounded as though, with the exception of becoming emotional, have I sounded as though I made sense what I was speaking about? You have indeed. I understand everything you've said. If I haven't, it is my fault. Then I follow this up. I may not live tomorrow and give any further testimony. The reason why I add this to this, since you assure me that I've been speaking since by then, I might be speaking since by following what I've said, and the only thing I want to get out to the public, and I can't say it here, is with authenticity, with sincerity of the truth of everything, and why my act was committed. But it can't be said here. It can't be said. It's got to be said amongst people of the highest authority that would give me the benefit of doubt. And following that, immediately give me the lie detector test after I do make the statement. Chairman Warren, if you felt that your life was in danger at the moment, how would you feel? Wouldn't you be reluctant to go on speaking even though you request me to do so? I think I might have some reluctance if I was in your position, yes. I think I would. I think I would figure it out very carefully as to whether it would endanger me or not. If you think that anything that I am doing or anything that I am asking you is endangering you in any way, shape, or form, I want you to feel absolutely free to say so, that the interview is over. What happens then? I didn't accomplish anything. No, nothing has been accomplished. Well then, you won't follow up with anything further? There wouldn't be anything further to follow up if you hadn't completed your statement. You said you have the power to do what you want to do. Is that correct? Exactly. Without any limitations? Within the purview of the executive order which has established the commission. We have the right to take testimony of anyone we want in this whole situation, and we have the right, if we choose to do so, to verify the statement in any way that we wish to do so. But you don't have the right to take a prisoner back with you when you want to? No, we have the power to subpoena witnesses to Washington if we want to, but we have taken the testimony of 200 or 300 people, I would imagine, here in Dallas without going to Washington. Yes, but those people aren't Jack Ruby. No, they weren't. They weren't. Now I want you to feel that we are not here to take any advantage of you, because I know that you are in a delicate position. And unless you had indicated not only through your lawyers, but also through your sister, who wrote a letter addressed either to me or to Mr. Rankin saying that you wanted to testify before the commission, unless she told us that, I wouldn't have even bothered you. Because I know you do have this case that is not finished, and I wouldn't jeopardize your position by trying to insist that you testify. So I want you to feel that you are free to refrain from testifying anytime you wish. But I will also be frank with you and say that I don't think it would be to your advantage to tell as much as you have and then to stop and not tell us the rest. I can't see what advantage that would give you at all. The thing is that with your power that you have, Chief Justice Warren, and all these gentlemen, too much time has gone by for me to give you any benefit of what I may know, what I may say now. No, that isn't a fact, because until we make our finding for the commission and until we make our report on the case, it is not too late. And there are other witnesses we have who are yet to be examined. So from our standpoint, it is timely. We are not handicapped at all by the lateness of your examination. Well, it is too tragic to talk about, Mr. Rankin said. Isn't it true that we waited until very late in our proceedings to talk to Mrs. Kennedy? Yes, I might say to you that we didn't take Mrs. Kennedy's statement until the day before yesterday. Mr. Rankin and I took her testimony then. So we are not treating you different from any other witness. I tell you, gentlemen, my whole family is in jeopardy. My sisters as to their lives. Yes? Naturally, I'm a foregone conclusion. My sisters Eva, Eileen, and Mary. I lost my sisters. My brothers Sam, Earl, Hyman, and myself, naturally, my in-laws, Harold Kaminsky, Marge Ruby, the wife of Earl, and Phyllis, the wife of Sam Ruby, they are in jeopardy of loss of their lives. Yet they have, just because they are blood related to myself. Does that sound serious enough to you, Chief Justice Warren? Nothing could be more serious if that is the fact. But your sister, I don't know whether it is your sister Eva or your other sister. Eileen wrote you a letter. Wrote the letter to me and told us that you would like to testify, and that is one of the reasons that we came down here. But unfortunately, when did you get the letter, Chief Justice Warren? It was a long time ago, I admit. I think it was roughly 2 and 3 months ago. Yes. Yes, I think it was, yes. At that time when you first got the letter and I was begging Joe Tonahill and the other lawyers to know the truth about me, certain things that are happening now wouldn't be happening at this particular time. Yes. Because when they would have known the truth about Jack Ruby and his emotional breakdown, yes, of why that Sunday morning, that thought never entered my mind prior to that Sunday morning, when I took it upon myself to try to be a martyr, or some screwball, you might say. But I felt very emotional and very carried away from Mrs. Kennedy. That with all the strife she had gone through, I had been following it pretty well, that someone owed it to our beloved president that she shouldn't be expected to face trial of this heinous crime. And I've never had the chance to tell that, to back it up, to prove it. Consequently, right at this moment, I am being victimized as part of a plot in the world's worst tragedy and crime of this moment. Months back, had I been given a chance, I take that back. Sometime back, a police officer of the Dallas Police Department wanted to know how I got into the building. And I don't know whether I requested a lie detector test or not, but my attorney wasn't available. When you are a defendant in the case, you say, speak to your attorney, you know? But that was a different time. It was after the trial, whenever it happened. At this moment, Lee Harvey Oswald isn't guilty of committing the crime of assassinating President Kennedy. Jack Ruby is. How can I fight that, Chief Justice Warren? Well, now, I want to say, Mr. Ruby, that as far as this commission is concerned, there is no implication of that in what we are doing. All right. There is a certain organization here. That I can assure you. There is an organization here, Chief Justice Warren. If it takes my life at this moment to say it, and Bill Decker said, be a man and say it, there is a John Birch Society right now in activity. And Edwin Walker is one of the top men of this organization. Take it for what it is worth, Chief Justice Warren. Unfortunately for me giving the people the opportunity to get in power because of the act I committed has put a lot of people in jeopardy with their lives. Don't register with you, does it? No, I don't understand that. Would you rather I just delete what I said and just pretend that nothing is going on? I would not indeed. I'm only interested in what you want to tell this commission. That is all I'm interested in. Well, I said my life. I won't be living long now. I know that. My family's lives will be gone. When I left my apartment that morning, what morning? Sunday morning. Sunday morning. Let's go back. Saturday, I watched Rabbi Seligman. Any of you watch it on Saturday morning? No, I didn't happen to hear it. He went ahead and eulogized, and here is a man that fought in every battle, went to every country, and had come back to his own country to be shot in the back. Mr. Ruby starts crying. I must be a great actor, I tell you that. No. That created a tremendous emotional feeling for me, the way he said that, prior to all the other times I was carried away. Then that Saturday night, I didn't do anything but visit a little club over here and had a Coca-Cola because I was sort of depressed. A fella that owns Pago Club, Bob Norton, and he knew something was wrong with me in a certain mood I was in. And I went home, and that weekend, the Sunday morning, I saw a letter to Caroline. 2 columns about a 16-inch area. Someone had written a letter to Caroline, the most heartbreaking letter. I don't remember the contents. Do you remember that? Mr. Moore said, I think I saw it. Yes, and alongside that letter on the same sheet of paper was a small comment in the newspaper that, I don't know how it was stated, that Mrs. Kennedy may have to come back for the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. That caused me to go like I did. I don't know, Chief Justice, but I got so carried away, and I remember prior to that thought, there has never been another thought in my mind. I was never malicious towards this person. No one else requested me to do anything. I never spoke to anyone about attempting to do anything. No subversive organization gave me any idea. No underworld person made any effort to contact me. It all happened that Sunday morning. The last thing I read was that Mrs. Kennedy may have to come back to Dallas for trial for Lee Harvey Oswald. And I don't know what bug got a hold of me. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to tell the truth word for word. I am taking a pill called Preludin, and it is a harmless pill, and it is very easy to get in a drugstore. It isn't a highly prescribed pill. I use it for dieting. I don't partake of that much food. I think that was a stimulus to give me an emotional feeling that suddenly I felt, which was so stupid that I wanted to show my love for our faith, being of a Jewish faith, and I never used the term, and I don't want to go into that. Suddenly the emotional feeling came over within me that someone owed this debt to our beloved president to save her the ordeal of coming back. I don't know why that came through my mind. And I drove past Main Street, past the county building, and there was a crowd already gathered there. And I guess I thought I knew he was going to be moved at 10 o'clock. I don't know how I knew. I listened to the radio and I passed a crowd and it looked, I'm repeating myself, and I took it for granted he had already been moved. And I parked my car in the lot across from the Western Union. Prior to that, I got a call from a little girl. She wanted some money. That worked for me, and I said, can't you wait till payday? And she said, Jack, you're going to be closed. So my purpose was to go to the Western Union, my double purpose, but the thought of committing the act wasn't until I left my apartment. Sending the wire was when I had the phone call, or the money order. I drove down Main Street. There was a little incident I left out that I started to go down a driveway, but I wanted to go by the wreaths, and I saw them and started to cry again. Then I drove, parked the car across from Western Union, went to the Western Union, sent the money order, whatever it was, walked the distance from Western Union to the ramp. I didn't sneak in. I didn't linger in there. I didn't crouch or hide behind anyone unless the television camera can make it seem that way. There was an officer talking, and I don't know what rank he had, talking to a Sam Peace in a car parked up on the curb. I walked down those few steps, and there was a person that I wouldn't say I saw red. It was a feeling I had for our beloved president and Mrs. Kennedy that he was insignificant to what my purpose was. And when I walked down the ramp, I would say there was an 8-foot clearance. Not that I wanted to be a hero, or I didn't realize that even if the officer would have observed me, the Klieg lights, but I can't take that. I did not mingle with the crowd. There was no one near me when I walked down the ramp, because if you will, time to time, I sent the money order. I think it was 10:17 Sunday morning. I think the actual act was committed. I take that back. Was it 11 o'clock? You should know this. Mr. Moore said it happened 11:21. Mr. Ruby said, no, when Oswald was shot. Mr. Moore said, I understood it to be 11:22. Mr. Ruby said, the clock stopped and said 11:21. I was watching on that thing, yes. Then it must have been 11:17, closer to 11:18. That is the timing when I left the Western Union to the time of the bottom of the ramp. You wouldn't have time enough to have any conspiracy, to be self-saving, to mingle with the crowd, as it was told about me. I realized it is a terrible thing I've done, and it was stupid. But I just was carried away emotionally. Do you follow that? Yes, I do indeed, every word. I had the gun in my right hip pocket, and impulsively, if that is the correct word here, I saw him, and that is all I can say. And I didn't care what happened to me. I think I used the words, you killed my president, you rat! The next thing, I was down on the floor. I said, I am Jack Ruby. You all know me. I never used anything malicious, nothing like SOB. I never said that I wanted to get 3 more off, as they stated. The only words, and I was highly emotional. To Ray Hall, he interrogated more than any other person down there. All I believe I said to him was, I didn't want Mrs. Kennedy to come back to trial. And I forget what else, and I used a little expression like being of the Jewish faith. I wanted to show that we loved our president, even though we are not of the same faith. And I have a friend of mine. Do you mind if it is a slipshod story? No, you tell us in your own way. A fellow whom I sort of idolized is of the Catholic faith and a gambler. Naturally, in my business, you meet people of various backgrounds. And the thought came, we were very close. And I always thought of little about him. And I knew that Kennedy, being Catholic, I knew how heartbroken he was. And even his picture of this Mr. McWillie flashed across me because I have a great fondness for him. All that blended into the thing that, like a screwball, the way it turned out, that I thought that I would sacrifice myself for a few moments of saving Mrs. Kennedy the discomfort of coming back to trial. Now, all these things in my background, I should have been the last person in the world to want to be a martyr. It happens, doesn't it, Chief Warren? I mean, for instance, I have been in the nightclub business, a burlesque house. It was a means of a livelihood. I knew persons of notorious backgrounds years ago in Chicago. I was with the Union back in Chicago, and I left the Union when I found out the notorious organization had moved in there. It was about 1940. Then recently, I had to make so many numerous calls that I am sure you know of. Am I right? Because of trying to survive in my business. My unfair competition had been running certain shows that we were restricted to run by regulation of the Union, but they violated all the rules of the Union, and I didn't violate any of them, and consequently, I was becoming insolvent because of it. All those calls were made with only in relation to seeing if they can help out, and the American Guild of Variety Artists. Does that confirm a lot of things you have heard? Every person I have called, and sometimes you may not even know a person intimately, you sort of tell them, well, you're stranded down there and you want some help. If they know of any official of the American Guild of Variety Artists to help me, because any competitors were putting me out of business. I even flew to New York to see Joe Glazer, and he called Bobby Fay. He was the national president. That didn't help. He called Barney Ross and Joey Adams. All these phone calls were related, not in any way involved to the underworld, because I have been away from Chicago 17 years down here in Dallas. As a matter of fact, I even called Mr. Hold it before I say it. Headed the American Federation of Labor, I can't think. In the state of Texas. Miller. I don't know. Is there a douche? Mailer? I called Mr. Mailer here in Texas to see if he could help me out. I wanted to set you gentlemen straight on all the telephone calls I had. This was a long time prior to what has happened. And the only association I had with those calls, the only questions that I inquired about, was if they could help me with the American Guild of Variety Artists, to see that they abolished it, because it was unfair to professional talent, abolished them from putting on their shows in Dallas. That is the only reason I made those calls. Where do we go from there? Well, I will go back to the original question that I asked you. Did you ever know Oswald? No. Let me add, you were refreshing my mind about a few things. Can I ask one thing? Did you talk to Mr. McWillie? I'm sure you have. Yes. He always wanted me to come down to Havana, Cuba. Invited me down there, and I didn't want to leave my business because I had to watch over it. He was a key man over in the Tropicana down there. That was during our good times. Was in harmony with our enemy of our present time. Yes. I refused. I couldn't make it. Finally, he sent me tickets to come down. Airplane tickets. I made the trip down there via New Orleans, and so I stayed at the Volks Apartments, and I was with him constantly. I was bored with the gambling, because I don't gamble. And there's nothing exciting unless you speak their language, which is Spanish, I believe. And that was the only environment. That was in August of 1959. Any thought of ever being close to Havana, Cuba? I called him frequently because he was down there, and he was the last person to leave, if I recall, when they had to leave, when he left the casino. As a matter of fact, on the plane, if I recall, I had an article sent me, and I wanted to get it published because I idolized McWillie. He is a pretty nice boy, and I happened to be idolizing him. When the plane left Havana and landed in the United States, some school teacher remarked that the United States is not treating Castro right. When they landed in the U.S., this Mr. Louis McWillie slugged this guy for making that comment. So I want you to know, as far as him having any subversive thoughts, and I wanted Tony to put it in the paper here, that is how much I thought of Mr. McWillie. And that is my only association. The only other association with him was, there was a gentleman here that sells guns. He has a hardware store on Singleton Avenue. Have I told this to you, gentlemen? It is Ray's Hardware. His name is Ray Brantley. I don't recall when he called me, but he was a little worried of the new regime coming in, and evidently he wanted some protection. He called me or sent me a letter and that I should call Ray Brantley. He wanted some 4 little Cobra guns, big shipment. So I should say myself rather, feeling no harm, I didn't realize because he wasn't sending them to me, and I thought there was no crime. The man wanted protection. He is earning a livelihood. I called Ray Brantley and I said, Ray, McWillie called me. I don't remember if he sent me a letter or he called, He said he wants 4 little cobras or something like that. He said, I know, Mac. I've been doing business with him for a long time. Meaning with reference to when he was living in Texas. He did a lot of hunting and things like that. Yes. That was the only relationship I had of any mention outside of phone calls to Mr. McWillie or any other person from Havana, Cuba. When was that? Chief Justice Warren said, when was that? Mr. Ruby said, now the guns. Am I correct? Did you ever go check on it? On Ray Brantley? Mr. Moore said, no. Mr. Ruby said, he denies I ever called. Evidently maybe he feels it would be illegal to send guns out of the country. I don't know. If you gentlemen know the law, I don't know the law. Chief Warren said, I don't know. Did I tell you this, Joe, about this? Mr. Tonahill said, yes, you did. Mr. Ruby said, that I wanted someone to go to Ray Brantley? Mr. Tonahill said, yes. Mr. Ruby said, when Phil Burleson came back with a letter signed, an affidavit that Ray Brantley said he never did receive a call from me, and the only gun he sent to McWillie was to the Vegas, but it came back that they didn't pick it up because it was a COD order. This definitely would do me more harm, because if I tell my story that I called Ray Brantley and he denies that I ever got a call from me, he denies he ever got a call from me, definitely that makes it look like I'm hiding something. Haven't I felt that right along? Haven't I felt that right along, Joe? Mr. Toenail said, you sure have, Jack. Mr. Ruby said, now, the reason I'm telling you these things, I never knew Lee Harvey Oswald. The first time I ever seen him was the time in the assembly room when they brought him out, when he had some sort of shiner on his eye. When was that little incident about the Cobras? About what year? That is all I'm interested in, Mr. Ruby said. It could have been prior to the early part of 1959? Yes, all right. That is the only call I made. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even follow up to inquire of this Mr. Brantley, whether he received it or what the recourse was. That is why I tell you, Chief Justice Warren. Who is this new gentleman, may I ask? Mr. Rankin said, this is Mr. Story, from your community, a lawyer who is working with the Attorney General and Mr. Jaworski in connection with watching the work of the Commission so that they will be satisfied as to the quality of work insofar of the state of Texas is concerned. Chief Justice Warren talking to Mr. Spector. He has now been working with us on the Commission. Keep on this trip, Mr. Ruby says. 8 days. A lot of your tourists were there. As a matter of fact, a lot of group tourists were going down. Students of schools. I mean, he had a way of purchasing tickets from Havana that I think he purchased them at a lesser price. He bought them from a travel agent in the Capri Hotel. He bought them. Did you meet McWillie? Mr. Moore says, I didn't. Mr. Rankin says, he was checked by the Commission in connection with this work. Chief Justice Warren, there was some story in one of the papers that you had been interested in shipping jeeps down to Cuba. Was there anything to that at all? No, but this was the earlier part, when that first time Castro had ever invaded Cuba. There was even a government article that they would need jeeps. I don't recall what it was, but I never had the facilities or the capabilities of knowing where to get jeeps. But probably in conversation with other persons, you see, it is a new land, and they have to have a lot of things. As a matter of fact, the U.S. government was wanting persons to help them at the particular time when they threw out the dictator Batista. And one particular time, there was a gentleman that smuggled guns to Castro. I think I told you that, Mr. Moore. I don't remember. Mr. Moore says, I don't recall that. I think his name is Longley, out of Bay, something, Texas, on the Bay Shore. And somehow I read the article about him, and he was given a jail term for smuggling guns to Castro. This is the early part of the revolution. Before the Batista government fell? Yes. I think he had a boat and he lived somewhere in Bay Shore, in the center part of Texas. Do you know him, Mr. Story? Do you know this man? Mr. Story said, no, I don't know him. Mr. Ruby says, how can I prove my authenticity of what I have stated here today? Well, you have testified under oath, and I don't even know that there is anything to disprove what you have said. No, because I will say this. You don't know if there is anything to disprove, but at this moment, there is a certain organization in this area that has been indoctrinated that I am the one that was the plot to assassinate the president. Mr. Rankin said, would you tell us what that is? It's the John Birch Society. Mr. Rankin said, can you tell us what basis you have for that, Mr. Ruby? Just a feeling of it. Mr. Warren, you don't recall when Friday night after leaving the Times-Herald, I went to my apartment and very impatiently awakened George Senator. As a matter of fact, used the words as I state, "You will have to get up, George. I want you to go with me." And he had been in bed for a couple of hours, which was about, I imagine, about 4:30 or 4:45 in the morning. And I called the club and asked this kid Larry if he knew how to pack a Polaroid. And he said yes. And I said, "Get up." And we went down and picked up Larry. And in the meantime, I don't recall if I stopped at the post office to find out his box number of this Bernard Weissman. I think the box number was 1792, or something to that. And then it came to my mind when I left the Times-Herald. I'm skipping back. Why, I had awakened George. I recall seeing a sign on a certain billboard. It said, "Impeach Earl Warren." You have heard something about that? I read something in the paper, yes, that is all. And it came from New Bedford or Massachusetts. I don't recall what the town was. And there was a similar number to that. And I thought at the time it would be the same number of 1792. But it was actually 1757. That is the reason I went down there to take the Polaroid picture of it. Because of that remaining in the city at that time. What happened to the picture? I don't know. I asked Jim Bowie or Alexandra to tell you. Mr. Rankin said, "Did you know Weissman before that?" I never knew him. When I said Jim Bowie, no one says a word? Mr. Bowie said, "We never have seen them." Mr. Ruby said, "They were in my person." Mr. Bowie said, "But no evidence came." Mr. Ruby said, "No, it did not, never. As a matter of fact, I went to the post office to check on box 1792. I even inquired with the man in charge of where you purchased the boxes, and I said to him, 'Who bought this box?' And he said, 'I can't give you that information. All I know is it is a legitimate business box purchase.' And I checked the various contents of mail there." Mr. Rankin said, "Did you know Officer Tippett?" Mr. Ruby said, "I knew there were 3 Tippetts on the force. The only one I knew used to work for the Special Services, and I am certain that this wasn't Tippett. This wasn't the man." Mr. Rankin said, "The man that was murdered. There was a story that you were sitting in your carousel club with Mr. Weissman, Officer Tippett, and another man who has been called a rich oil man, at one time shortly before the assassination. Can you tell us anything about that?" "Who was this rich oil man?" Mr. Rankin said, "Can you remember?" "We haven't been told. We are just trying to find out anything that you know about him." Mr. Ruby said, "I am one that made up such a big issue of Bernard Weissman's ad. Maybe you do things to cover up if you are capable of doing it." As a matter of fact, Saturday afternoon we went over to the Turf Bar Lounge, and it was a whole hullabaloo, and I showed the pictures. "Impeach Earl Warren" to Bellaccio, and he saw the pictures and got very emotional. And Bellaccio said, "Why did the newspaper take this ad of Weissman?" And Bellaccio said, "I have got to leave Dallas." And suddenly, after making that statement, I realized it is his incapability, and suddenly you do things impulsively, and suddenly you realize if you love the city, you stay here and you make the best of it. And there were witnesses. I said, "The city was good enough for you all before this, and now you feel that way about it?" And that was Bellaccio. As far as Tippett, it is not Tippett's. It is not Tippett's. It is Tippett. Mr. Rankin said, "This Weissman and the rich oil man, did you ever have a conversation with them?" Mr. Ruby said, "There was only a few. Bill Rudman from the YMCA, and I haven't seen him in years. And there is a Bill Howard, but he is not a rich oil man. He owns the Store Club now. He used to dabble in oil." Chief Justice Warren said, "This story was given by a lawyer by the name of Mark Lane, who is representing Mrs. Marguerite Oswald, the mother of Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was in the paper, so we subpoenaed him. And he testified that someone had given him information to the effect that a week or 2 before President Kennedy was assassinated, that in your carousel club, you and Weissman and Tippett, Officer Tippett, the one who was killed, and a rich oil man had an interview or conversation for an hour or 2. And we asked him who it was that told him, and he said that it was confidential and he couldn't tell at the moment, but that he would find out for us whether he could be released or not from his confidential relationship. He has never done it, and we have written him several letters asking him to disclose the name of that person, and he has never complied." Mr. Ruby says, "Isn't that foolish? If a man is patriotic enough in the first place, who I am to be concerned if he wasn't an informer. I am incarcerated. Nothing to be worried about anyone hurting me. Mr. Ruby, I am not questioning your story at all. I wanted you to know the background of this thing, and to know that it was with us only hearsay. But I did feel our record should show that we would ask you the question and that you would answer it, and you have answered it. How many days prior to the assassination was that? My recollection is that it was a week or two. Is that correct? Did anyone have knowledge that their beloved president was going to visit here prior to that time? Or what is the definite time that they knew he was going to come to Dallas? Well, I don't know just what those dates are. I see. I just don't know. Well, we wanted to ask you that question because this man had so testified that we had been trying ever since to get him to give the source of that information. He won't do it, so we will leave the matter at that. No, I am as innocent regarding any conspiracy as any of you gentlemen in the room, and I don't want anything to be run over lightly. I want you to dig into it with any biting, any question that might embarrass me, or anything that might bring up my background, which isn't so terribly spotted. I've never been a criminal. I've never been in jail. I know when you live in the city of Chicago and you're in the livelihood of selling tickets to sporting events, your lucrative patrons are some of these people. But you don't mean anything to those people. You don't know them as you get acquainted with them at the sporting events or the ballpark. The prize fights? Yeah, the prize fights. If that was your means of livelihood, yet you don't have no other affiliation with them. So when I say I know them, or what I have read from stories of personalities that are notorious, that is the extent of my involvement in any criminal activity. I have never been a bookmaker. I have never stolen for a living. I am not a gangster. I've never used a goon squad for union activities. All I was a representative to sound out applications for the American Federation of Labor, and if the employees would sign it, we would accept them as members. I never knew what a goon looked like in Chicago, with the exception of when I went to the service. I never belonged to any subversive organization. I don't know any subversive people that are against my beloved country. Mr. Rankin said, You have never been connected with the Communist Party? I never have. All I ever done with my life. I had a very rough start in life, but anything I've done, I at least tried to do in good taste. Whatever I have been active in. Mr. Rankin said, There was a story that you had a gun with you during the show-up that you described in the large room there. Miss Ruby said, I'll be honest with you, I lied about it. It isn't so. I didn't have a gun, but in order to make my defense more accurate, to save your life, that is the reason the statement was made. Mr. Rankin said, It would be quite helpful to the commission if you could, in the first place, I want to get to the trip to Cuba. Was that in 1959? Yes, because I had to buy a $2 ticket, pass to get through Florida. Mr. Rankin said, Did you have any other trip to Cuba? Never. That is the only one I made. I stayed at the Volks apartment with Mr. McWillie, lived in his apartment, ate directly in a place called Wolf's downstairs. Wouldn't know how to speak their language. I wouldn't know how to communicate with them. I probably had 2 dates from meeting some young ladies I got to dancing with, because my dinners were served in the Tropicana. One thing I forgot to tell you, you are bringing my mind back to a few things. The owners, the greatest that have been expelled from Cuba, are the Fox brothers. They own the Tropicana. Mr. Rankin said, Who are the Fox brothers? Martin Fox, and I can't think of the other name. Rankin, do you know where they're located now? They're in Miami, Florida. They know everything about McWillie, I heard, and know the officials. I met McWillie because he came to the club, and he came to the club to look over the show. And you get to talk to people and meet a lot of different types of people. The Fox brothers came to Dallas. I don't know which one it was, to collect a debt that some man owed the Cotton Gin Company here. Do you know their name, Mr. Bowie? Mr. Bowie said Murray or something. Mr. Ruby said, He gave some bad checks on a gambling debt, and they came to visit me. The lawyer, I think, is Mark Lane. That is the attorney that was killed in New York. Chief Justice Warren, that is the fellow who represents, or who did represent, Mrs. Marguerite Oswald. I think I read in the paper where he is no longer representing her. Mr. Rankin, he is still alive, though. Oh, yes. Mr. Ruby, there was one Lane that was killed in a taxi cab. I thought he was an attorney in Dallas. That was Dave Lane. There is a very prominent attorney in Dallas, McCord. McCord represents the Fox brothers here. They called me because the Fox brothers wanted to see me, and I came down to the hotel. And Mrs. McWillie, Mr. McWillie was married to her at that time, and if I recall, I didn't show them off to the airport at the time. That is when they were still living in Havana, the Fox brothers. We had dinner at, how do you pronounce that restaurant at Love Field? Luau? That serves the Chinese food. Dave McCord. I was in his presence, and I was invited to dinner, and there was an attorney by the name of Leon. Is he associated with McCord? And there was a McLean. Alfred was killed in a taxi in New York. He was at this dinner meeting I had with McCord. I don't know if Mrs. McWillie was along, and one of the Fox brothers, because he had just been awarded the case that this person owns, this gin company, and that was compelled to pay off. Mr. Rankin said, I think, Miss Ruby, it would be quite helpful to the commission if you could tell, as you recall it, just what you said to Mr. Sorrells and the others after the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald. Can you recall that? Mr. Ruby said, the only one I recall Mr. Sorrells in. There were some incorrect statements made at this time. Mr. Rankin, can you tell us what you said, Congressman Ford? Or can you tell us what you said? Then Congressman Ford said, first, tell us when this took place. Mr. Rankin, how soon after the shooting occurred? Mr. Ruby, well, Ray Hall was the first one that interrogated me. Wanted to know my whole background. Mr. Rankin, can you tell us how soon it was? Within a few minutes after the shooting? No, I waited in a little room there somewhere upstairs in, I don't know what floor it was, I don't recall. Mr. Rankin, where did this occur, on the third floor? One of those floors, I don't know whether it was the third or the second. If you are up on an elevator. Mr. Rankin, can you give us any idea of the time after the shooting? I spent an hour with Mr. Hall, Ray Hall, and I was very much broken up emotionally, and I constantly repeated that I didn't want Mrs. Kennedy to come back to trial. And those are my words, constantly repeated, Mr. Hall. And I heard there was a statement made. Now I'm skipping. And then I gave Mr. Hall my complete background about things he wanted to know, my earlier background going back from the years. And I guess there was nothing else to say to Hall, because as long as I stated why I did it, it is not like planning a crime and you are confessing something. I already confessed. And all it took is one sentence, why I did it. Now what else could I have said that you think I could have said? Refresh my memory a little bit, Mr. Rankin. There was a conversation with Mr. Sorrells in which you told him about the matter. Do you recall that? The only thing I ever recall I said to Mr. Ray Hall and Sorrells is, I said, being of Jewish faith, I wanted to show my love for my president and his lovely wife. After I said whatever I said, then a statement came out that someone introduced Mr. Sorrells to me, and I said, what are you, a newsman? Or something to that effect, which is really what I'm trying to say is the way it sounded is like I was looking for publicity and inquiring if you were a newsman. I wanted to see you. But I am certain, I don't recall definitely, but I know in my right mind because I know my motive for doing it. And certainly to gain publicity, to take a chance of being mortally wounded, as I said before, and who else could have timed it so perfectly by seconds? If it were timed that way, then someone in the police department is guilty of giving the information as to when Lee Harvey Oswald was coming down. I never made a statement. I never inquired from the television man what time Lee Harvey Oswald was coming down. Because really, a man in his right mind would never ask that question. I never made the statement. I wanted to get 3 more off. Someone had to do it. You wouldn't do it. I never made those statements. I never called the man by any obscene name because, as I stated earlier, there was no malice in me. He was insignificant to my feelings for the love of Mrs. Kennedy and our beloved president. He was nothing comparable to them, so I can't explain it. I never used any words, as a matter of fact. There were questions at the hearing with Roy Pryor and a few others. I may have used one word, a little weasel or something, but I didn't use it. I don't remember because Roy said it. If he said I said it, I may have said it. I never made the statement to anyone that I intended to get him. I never used any obscene words that were stated. Anything I said was with emotional feeling of I didn't want Mrs. Kennedy to come back to trial. Former President Ford said, it has been alleged that you went out to Parkland Hospital. No, I didn't go there. They tried to ask me. My sisters asked me. Some people told my sister that you were there. I am of sound mind. I never went there. Everything that transpired during the tragedy, I was at the Morning News building. Congressman Ford said, You didn't go out there subsequent to the assassination? No. In other words, like somebody is trying to make me something of a martyr in that case. No, I never did. Does this conflict with my story and yours in great length? Mr. Moore. Substantially the same, Jack, as well as I remember. Mr. Rankin. Did you say anything about people of your religion have guts or something like that? I said it. I never said it up there. I could have said, weren't you afraid of getting your head blown off? I said, well, to be truthful, I have a little nerve. I could have said that. Now, I could have said to the doctor that was sent to me, Bromberg, because there is certain familiarity you have, because it is like you have an attorney representing you. It is there. It is there. But I did say this. McWillie made a statement about me, something to the effect of, he is considered a pretty rough guy, this McWillie. He said, one thing about Jack Ruby, he runs this club and no one runs over him. And you have a different type of entertainment here than any other part of the country, our type of entertainment. But I don't recall that. I could have said the sentimental feeling that I may have used. Former President Ford said, when you flew to Cuba, where did you go from Dallas en route? What was the step-by-step process by which you arrived at Havana? I think I told Mr. Moore I stopped in New Orleans. Sometime I stopped in New Orleans, and I don't remember if I stopped in Florida or New Orleans, but I know I did stop in New Orleans because I bought some Carioca rum coming back. I know I was to Miami on a stopover. It could have been on the way back. I only went to Cuba once, so naturally, when I bought the Carioca rum, there was a couple of fellows that sell tickets for Delta Airlines, and they know me like I know you, and I'm sure you gentlemen have spoken to them, and they were going to tell me where to go in Havana and have a ball, and I told them I was going to go there and who I was going to look up and everything else. Representative Ford. They were Delta Airlines employees in New Orleans or Dallas? Mr. Ruby. No, in New Orleans. Evidently, I went out to the Delta Airlines at Love Field and caught the plane. I may have taken the flight. Here is what could have happened. I could have made a double stop from Havana on the way back and taking in Miami and then taking another plane to New Orleans. I'm not certain. But I only made one trip to Havana. Yet I know I was in Miami and I was in New Orleans. And the next time I went to New Orleans, when I tried to look up some showgirl by the name of Jada, I stopped in to see the same fellows at Delta Airlines. Mr. Rankin. Do you recall going up the elevator after the shooting of Oswald? That is so small to remember, I guess it is automatic, you know. Mr. Rankin. Did you have this gun a long while that you did the shooting with? Yes. Mr. Rankin. You didn't carry it all the time? I did. I had it in a little bag with my money constantly. I carry my money. Congressman, do you have something further? You can get more out of me. Let's not break up too soon. Representative Ford. When you got to Havana, who did you meet in Havana? McWillie! Now here it is. Here is what happened. One of the Fox brothers came to visit me in Dallas with his wife. They came to the Vegas Club with Mrs. McWillie, and we had taken some pictures, some 8x10s. Evidently, the Foxes were in exile at the time, because when I went to visit McWillie, when he sent me the plane tickets, they looked through the luggage and they saw a photograph of Mr. Fox and his wife. They didn't interrogate, but they went through everything and held me up for hours. Representative Ford, Castro employees? Yes, because evidently, in my ignorance, I didn't realize I was bringing a picture that they knew was a bitter enemy. At that time, they knew that the Fox brothers weren't going to jail or something was going to happen. Whether it was they were in exile at the time, I don't know. But they came to my club, the Vegas Club, and we had taken pictures. Mr. McWillie was waiting for me, and he saw me go through the customs line for a couple of hours, and he said, Jack, they never did this to anyone before. Evidently, they had me pretty well lined up as to where I come in the picture of Mr. Rivera Fox. I can't think of his name. Representative Ford, you spent 8 days there in Havana. Yeah, approximately. Representative Ford, and you stayed at the apartment of Mr. Volk's Apartments. I never used the phone. I wouldn't know how to use the phone. Probably to call back to Dallas. And the only time Mr. McWillie had to be at the club early, and so I remained a little later in town. Not often. Because I saved money when I rode with him, because they charge you quite a bit. But I didn't want to get there too early, because I get there at 7 o'clock. Wasn't very lively. Because I would always be with him for the complete evening. We leave the place and stop somewhere to get coffee, a little dugout. I saw Ava Gardner down there at the time when I was there. She was visiting. Representative Ford, what prompted you to leave at the end of 8 days? I was bored because gambling isn't my profession, and when you have a business to run and there weren't many tourists I could get acquainted with there, I went to the Capri rooftop to go swimming and went to the National to go swimming once. Representative Ford, did you ever go to Mexico? Have you ever been to Mexico? The only time, 30 or 40 years ago, 1934, Representative Ford, this trip to Cuba was the only time you left the country other than military service? Actually, I didn't leave in the military. I was stationed 3.5 years here in the States. Let's see, never out of the U.S. except one time in Havana, Cuba. Now, you said there were some other things. Would you mind telling us anything you have on your mind? No, because as I said earlier, you seem to have gotten the juicy part of the story up to now in the very spasmodic way of telling it. How valuable am I to you to give you all this information? Well, how valuable is rather an indefinite term, but I think it is very helpful to our commission report. I think the report would have been deficient if it had not been for this interview we have had with you. So we are interested in anything that you would like to tell us in your own language. The only thing is this. If I cannot get these tests you give, it is pretty haphazard to tell you the things I should tell you. Mr. Moore, you seem to have known more about my interrogation than anybody else, right? Mr. Moore, I think you have told us about everything you told me. Mr. Rankin, it isn't entirely clear how you feel about that your family and you are threatened by your telling what you have to tell this commission. How do you come to the conclusion that they might be killed? Will you tell us a little bit more about that if you can? Mr. Ruby, well, assuming that, as I stated before, some persons are accusing me falsely of being part of the plot, naturally, and all the time from over 6 months ago, my family has been interested in helping me. Mr. Rankin, by that you mean a party to the plot of Oswald? Mr. Ruby, that was party to the plot. That I was a party to the plot to silence Oswald. All right now, when your family believes you and knows your mannerisms and your thoughts and knows your sincerity, they have lived with you all your life and they know your emotional feelings and your patriotism. On the surface, they see me only as the guilty assailant of Oswald, and by helping me like they have, going all out, my brother, who has a successful business, I know he is going to be killed, and I haven't seen him in years. And suddenly he feels that he wants to help me because he believes that I couldn't be further involved than the actual... When I told him I did it because of Mrs. Kennedy, that is all he had to hear, because I would never involve my family or involve him in a conspiracy. Everyone haven't let me down because they read the newspaper away from Dallas that stated certain facts about me, but they were untrue because they wouldn't come out and put those things in the newspapers that they should be putting in. And people outside of Dallas read the Dallas newspapers and are all in sympathy with me. As far as the country itself, they felt that, well, Jack did it. They probably felt they would do the same thing. That sympathy isn't going to help me because the people that have the power here, they have a different verdict. They already have me as the accused assassin of our beloved president. Now, if I sound screwy telling you this, then I must be screwy. Mr. Ruby, I think you're entitled to a statement to this effect because you have been frank with us and have told us your story. I think I can say to you that there has been no witness before this commission, out of the hundreds we have questioned, who has claimed to any personal knowledge that you were a party to any conspiracy to kill a president. Yes, but you don't know this area here. No, I don't vouch for anything except that I think I am correct in that. Am I not? Mr. Rankin, that is correct. I just wanted to tell you before our own commission, and I might say to you also that we have explored the situation. I know, but I want to say this to you. If certain people have the means and want to gain something by propagandizing something to their own use, they will make ways to present certain things that I do look guilty. Well, I will make this additional statement to you, that if any witness should testify before the commission that you were, to their knowledge, a party to any conspiracy to assassinate the president, I assure you that we will give you the opportunity to deny it and to take any test that you may desire to so disprove it. I don't anticipate that there will be any such testimony, but should there be, we'll give you that opportunity. Does that seem fair? No, that isn't going to save my family. Well, we can't do everything at once. I am in a tough spot, and I don't know what the solution can be to save me. And I know our wonderful president, Lyndon Johnson. As soon as he was president of this country, he appointed you as head of this group. But through certain falsehoods, that have been said about me and to other people, the John Birch Society, I am as good as guilty as the accused assassin of President Kennedy. How can you remedy that, Mr. Warren? Do any of you men have any ways of remedying that? Mr. Bill Decker, said to be a man and speak up, I am making a statement now, and I may not live the next hour when I walk out of this room. Now, it is the most fantastic story you have heard in a lifetime. I did something out of the goodness of my heart. Unfortunately, Chief Earl Warren, had you been around 5 or 6 months ago, and I know your hands were tied, you couldn't do it, and immediately our president would have gotten a hold of my true story, or whatever would have been said about me. A certain organization wouldn't have been so completely formed now, so powerful, to use me because I am of Jewish extraction, Jewish faith, to commit the most dastardly crime that has ever been committed. Can you understand now in visualizing what happened, what powers, what momentum has been carried on to create this feeling of mass feeling against my people, against certain people that were against them prior to their power? That goes over your head, doesn't it? Well, I don't quite get the full significance of it, Mr. Ruby. I know what you feel about the John Birch Society. Very powerful. I think it is powerful. Yes, I do. Of course, I don't have all the information that you feel you have on the subject. Unfortunately, you don't have, because it is too late. And I wish that our beloved President Lyndon Johnson would have delved deeper into the situation here. Hear me, not to accept just circumstantial facts about my guilt or innocence, and would have questioned to find the truth about me before he relinquished certain powers to these certain people. Well, I'm afraid I don't know what power you believe you're relinquishing to them. I think that it is difficult to understand what you have to say. I want to say this to you. The Jewish people are being exterminated at this moment. Consequently, a whole new form of government is going to take over our country, and I know I won't live to see you another time. Do I sound sort of screwy in telling you these things? No. I think that is what you believe, or you wouldn't tell them under oath. But it is a very serious situation. I guess it is too late to stop it, isn't it? All right, I want to ask you this. All you men have been chosen by the president for this committee, is that right? Representative Ford and I are the only members of the commission that are here. Mr. Rankin of the commission is employed as our chief counsel. Mr. Rankin employed Mr. Spector and Mr. Ball as members of his staff. You know who the other gentlemen are here. You know that Mr. Moore is a member of the Secret Service, and he has been a liaison officer with our staff since the commission was formed. Representative Ford, are there any questions that ought to be asked to help clarify the situation that you described? Mr. Ruby, there is only one thing. If you don't take me back to Washington tonight to give me a chance to prove to the president that I am not guilty, then you will see the most tragic thing that will ever happen. And if you don't have the power to take me back, I won't be around or be able to prove my innocence or guilt. Now, up to this moment, I've been talking with you for how long? I would say for the better part of 3 hours. All right. Wouldn't it be ridiculous for me to speak sensibly all this time and give you this climatic talk that I have? Maybe something can be saved. Something can be done. What have you got to answer to that, Chief Justice Warren? Well, I don't know what can be done, Mr. Ruby, because I don't know what you anticipate we will encounter. Representative Ford, is there anything more you can tell us if you went back to Washington? Yes. You are sincere in wanting to take me back? Ford, we are most interested in all the information you have. All I know is maybe something can be saved. Because right now, I want to tell you this. I am used as a scapegoat, and there is no greater weapon that you can use to create some falsehood about some of the Jewish faith, especially at the terrible, heinous crime such as killing the President Kennedy. Now, maybe something can be saved. It may not be too late. Whatever happens, if our President, Lyndon Johnson, only knew the truth from me. But if I am eliminated, there won't be any way of knowing. Right now, when I leave your presence now, I'm the only one that can bring out the truth to our President, who believes in righteousness and justice. But he has been told, I am certain, that I was part of a plot to assassinate the President. I know your hands are tied. You are helpless. Chief Justice Warren, Mr. Ruby, I think I can say this to you, that if he has been told any such thing, there is no indication of any kind that he believes it. I'm sorry, Chief Justice Warren. I thought I would be very effective in telling you what I have said here. But in all fairness, everyone, maybe all I want to do is beg that if they found out I was telling the truth, maybe they can succeed in what their motives are. But maybe my people won't be tortured and mutilated. Well, you may be sure that the president and his whole commission will do anything that is necessary to see that your people are not tortured. No. You may be sure of that. No. The only way you can do that is if he knows the truth. That I'm telling the truth, and that is why I'm down in the basement Sunday morning. And maybe some sense of decency will come out and they can still fulfill their plan, as I stated before, without my people going through torture and mutilation. The president will know everything that you have said. Everything that you have said. But I won't be around, Chief Justice. I won't be around to verify these things. You're going to tell them. Mr. Thornhill, who do you think is going to eliminate you, Jack? Mr. Ruby, I have been used for a purpose, and there will be a certain tragic occurrence happening if you don't take my testimony and somehow vindicate me so my people don't suffer because of what I've done. Chief Justice Warren, but we have taken your testimony. We have it here. It will be a permanent form of the President of the United States, and for the Congress of the United States, and for the courts of the United States, and for the people of the entire world. It is there. It will be recorded for all to see. That is the purpose of our coming here today. We feel that you are entitled to have your story told. You have lost me, though. You have lost me, Chief Justice Warren. Lost you in what sense? I won't be around for you to come and question me again. Well, it is very hard for me to believe that. I'm sure that everybody would want to protect you to the very limit. All I want is a lie detector test, and you refuse to give it to me. Because as it stands now, and the truth serum, and any other, pentothal, how do you pronounce it, whatever it is, and they will not give it to me. Because I want to tell the truth, and then I want to leave this world. But I don't want my people to be blamed for something that is untrue, and they claim it has happened. Mr. Ruby, I promise you that you will be able to take such a test. When? You will not have to let me see when we can, you will have to let me see when we can figure that out. But I assure you, it won't be delayed, because our desire is to terminate the work of the commission and make our report to the public just as soon as possible, so there won't be any misunderstanding caused by all the rumors or stories that have been out that are consistent with the evidence of the case. But it will not be unnecessarily delayed, and we will do it on behalf of the commission, I promise you. All I want, and I beg you, when you are going to see the president, well, I have no date with the president. I don't know just when, but as soon as I do see him, I will be glad to tell him that what you've said. All I want is to take a polygraph to tell the truth. That's all I want to do. Yes, that I promise you, you can do. Because my people are going to suffer about the things that will be said about me. Yes, well, I promise. Hold on another minute. All right. How do you know if the facts I stated about everything I said, statements with reference to, are the truth or not? Well, if you want a test made to test those principal questions, we'll work them out so they can be tested. As I understand it, you can't use the polygraph to say now that this is the story. I know that. To say you have the story of Jack Ruby, you can't do that. I know that. You can clarify by questioning me when I conceived the idea and what my answer would naturally be that Sunday morning. Maybe I can help the situation this way. Suppose you list for us, if you can, the questions you would like to have asked on the polygraph to establish the truth of your testimony. What things do you consider vital in it, and what would you like to have verified? Yes, but you are telling me to do these things. These things are going to be promised, but you see, they aren't going to let me do these things. Because when you leave here, I'm finished. My family is finished. Representative Ford, isn't it true, Mr. Chief Justice, that the same maximum protection and security Ms. Ruby has been given in the past will be continued? But now that I have divulged certain information because I want to be honest, all I want to take is a polygraph test and tell the truth about things and combat the lies that have been told about me. Now maybe certain people don't know the truth that may come out of me. Is that plausible? Representative Ford, in other words, the Chief Justice has agreed, and I on the Commission wholeheartedly concur, that you will be given a polygraph test expeditiously as possible. And I'm sure you can rely on what has been stated here by the chairman. How are we going to communicate and so on? We will communicate directly with you. You have a lost cause, Earl Warren. You don't stand a chance. They feel about you like they do about me, Chief Justice Warren. I shouldn't hurt your feelings in telling you that. That won't hurt my feelings, because I have had some evidence of the feeling that some people have concerning me. But you are the only one that can save me. I think you can. Yes? But by delaying minutes, you lose the chance. And all I want to do is tell the truth, and that is all. There was no conspiracy, but by you telling them what you are going to do and how you're going to do it, it is too late as of this moment. You take my word for it, and the word of Representative Ford that we will continue this thing at the earliest possible moment, and that it will be done in time. It will be done in time. Well, you won't ever see me again, I tell you that. And I've lost my family. Yes. No, you don't believe me, do you? To be frank with you, I believe that you are not stating now what is the fact. I don't say you don't believe it, but I believe that I will be able to see you again, and that we'll be able to take the test that you're speaking of. Well, I think we have tried. We are tired. I think we have tired, Mr. Ruby. We have had time here for close to 4 hours, and I am sure our reporter must be equally tired. But we appreciate your patience and your willingness to testify in this for this matter. All I want to do is tell the truth, and the only way you can know it is by the polygraph, as that is the only way you can know it. That we will do for you. As of 2:50 p.m., the President's Commission will cease. That is the end.